Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 17. Then God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You must have no other gods before me. Do not make an idol for yourself, no form whatsoever, of anything in the sky above or on the earth below, or in the waters under the earth. Do not bow down to them or worship them, because I, in the Lord your God, am a passionate God. I punish children for their parents' sins, even to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me. But I am loyal and gracious to the thousandth generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. Do not use the Lord your God's name as if it were of no significance. The Lord won't forgive any who uses his name that way. Remember the Sabbath day and treat it as holy. 6 days you may work and do all your tasks, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to your Lord, your God. Do not do any work on it, not you, your sons or daughters, your male or female servants, your animals, or the immigrant who is living with you. Because the Lord made the heavens and earth, the sea, and everything that is in them in 6 days, but rested on the seventh day. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother so that your life will be long on the fertile land that the Lord your God is giving you. Do not kill, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not testify falsely against your neighbor. Do not desire and try to take your neighbor's house. Do not desire and try to take your neighbor's wife, male or female servant, ox, donkey, or anything else that belongs to your neighbor.
All right, thank you. The 10 Commandments. Very good. That was a long reading. Well, just last week, I was congratulating us on finishing the first book of the Bible back on January 19th. We had finished reading Genesis, if you're keeping up with the Bible year readings, and here we are 11 days later, and today's reading that's assigned takes us to the very end of the second book, the book of Exodus, and tomorrow we start reading Leviticus. On the welcome table, and on a chair in the back, we've printed out a reading calendar. If you're keeping up with the readings, that might be helpful for you. If you haven't been doing the readings, you might want to give it a try for a month. You can pick up one of those. Again, we're starting a brand new book of the Bible tomorrow. It's a good time to get started. You also will notice that our projectors look a little different today. We have the old sort of faded projector over here, and we have a new crisp projector over here. We're in sort of transition. It was evident from the new sanctuary projectors that all of you were missing pretty much all of the really cool details in the slides we were using because our projectors were past their expiration date, if you will, even after we replaced the bulb. And so we bit the bullet and pulled the trigger and got some new projectors, one of which didn't work, had to send it back, which is why you're just seeing one today. And they sold us the wrong lenses, so it doesn't fill the whole screen quite yet. But we're going to get there, much like the Israelites in the wilderness. It's just one step at a time. Eventually we'll reach the promised land of clarity on our screens, and then we'll start taking up special offerings to pay for it all. So that's later. That's later. Well, last week we did look at the first 15 chapters of Exodus, which told us the foundational story of Israel, that God delivers his people by bringing them through the waters of the sea and into the wilderness, where Moses and his sister Miriam celebrate God's greatness with song there in chapter 15. So God's done this great thing for them. The question is, now what? Here we have our map. You might want to look at this screen. You can actually see it. Now what? Well, now it's on to the promised land. I mean, that was the whole point of freeing the Israelites from slavery to begin with. It is 250 miles from where they left Egypt to get to the land that God had promised to Abraham. Now, given the number of Israelites, all the ages of men and women and children and all their possessions and livestock, it should take 250 miles, maybe 2 or 3 months needed to make that journey If you're one of those like really fit hikers, maybe just 5 days. But a crowd like this, it's going to take a while. But the question is, why did it take them 40 years instead? There's no route from Egypt to the promised land that should take you 40 years, even if you're walking really, really slow. The problem is that the shortest route would take them along the Mediterranean Sea and right through the land of the Philistines, who would have immediately slaughtered them all. So obviously we can't go that way. And not to mention that, if you veer slightly around the Philistines, you're going to get into the most arid part of the Sinai Desert, and you would likely perish before you got there from lack of water. In other words, there are no shortcuts to the promised land. They have to take this longer, winding road. And of course, your Bible maps and others, you'll see the little red. They sort of wander down the peninsula and back up, and then they make a loop and circle back before they actually make it up. 40 years it took them. And the fact that it took them 40 years tells us that there's got to be something else going on. And that something else is that the time in the wilderness is not just a physical journey. This wilderness wandering, this 40 years in the wilderness that we begin in this section of Exodus is a spiritual journey for them. These people have been in Egypt for 400 years. They haven't learned what it means to be God's people again. They haven't learned what it means to trust in God again. And while they may know of God's promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they certainly know how God saved them from slavery in Egypt, they do not yet know how to live in response to all God has done for them and all that God has promised. And we see that lack of trust immediately as you read through the second half of Exodus. They get through the sea and they celebrate with song. And in the very next chapter, we read this story. The whole Israelite community complained against Moses and Aaron in the desert. The Israelites said to them, "Oh, how we wish the Lord had just put us to death while we were still in the land of Egypt." There's some thanks for you. There we could sit by the pots cooking meat and eat our fill of bread. Instead, you've brought us out into this desert to starve the whole assembly to death. O ye of little faith. And so God hears their grumbling and he intervenes and he provides them with food. They call it manna. We don't know what it is. They didn't know what it is because the word manna literally means, what is it? Manna is actually a question. It's not a noun. It's what is it? They don't know. They had no clue, but they did know they could eat it. But this manna that was given to them for food came with conditions. They can only collect enough of it for one day. If they collect it for 2 days, it'll spoil. They can only collect enough for one day. They have to trust that God's going to provide for them the next day and the day after that. They have to learn to trust God, and it's hard. And as we read, they tested God. They tried to hoard it a little bit, and it didn't work out for them well. They fail. Trusting God, learning to trust God is hard. So they get this manna. They also got some quail. And then in chapter 17, the very next chapter, it happens all over again. In chapter 17, verse 3, but the people were very thirsty for water. First it was hungry, now we're thirsty. It's like Israelite is a 3-year-old. And they complained to Moses, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us, our children, and our livestock with thirst?" And so God intervenes again, and through Moses provides them with water. It's clear, trusting God, learning to trust God, it is difficult then as it is now. And so in chapter 19, Moses leads Israel to the foot of Mount Sinai. God invites the people of Israel to enter into a covenant relationship. And chapter 19 is so important in the book of Exodus. This covenant builds on God's promises to Abraham all the way back in Genesis 12 when God promises to bless Abraham and his descendants, and through his family, God would bless all of creation, all the peoples of the earth. This is God's strategy for redeeming all of creation. That promise is the foundation of this new covenant with Israel, but now the Israelites have a part to play too. It's not just God's promises, it's also what is expected in return for their being God's people. We're told that they are called to live in a very particular way. God says, "You will be a kingdom of priests for me," which means that they will become God's representatives and show all the other peoples of the world what God is truly like. In order to fulfill their end of the covenant, Israel must live by God's laws. That's the particular way of living. That's what allows other people to see this peculiar people and through that understand who God is. And so they have to live by God's laws. They have to be faithful to God's justice, God's righteousness, the compassion, and the generosity of God. And the people respond emphatically, everything that the Lord has said, we will do. And so in cloud and lightning and thunder, God's presence appears at the top of Mount Sinai, and Moses goes up into that presence and there receives the 10 Commandments that we heard read and shared. These 10 Commandments are just the basics, the basic term of this covenant about how the Israelites and God are going to be in relationship with each other. The 10 Commandments, I mean, if you've grown up in church like me, you probably at some point tried to memorize the 10 Commandments. I still remember with great pride when I got that gold star by my name on the poster for memorizing the 10 Commandments. Amen? I mean, I was 37 years old, but still, it counts. Absolutely. And unlike some of the more of the obscure, there's 613 laws in the Old Testament. These 10 Commandments are still relevant. They're still challenging today for us as they were then. And we're still just as bad at remembering them and still just as bad at keeping them. As we heard in Shannon's video and beautifully in Ann's prayer, the first 4 commandments are all the ways that we honor God. No other gods before me. Don't make an idol for yourself. Don't use the Lord's name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day and treat it as holy. And then the last 6 commandments are the ways we honor our relationships with one another. Honor your father and mother. Do not kill. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not testify falsely against your neighbor, and do not desire what your neighbor has. Should we take a survey on how we're doing? Some are easier than others. I'm trusting that none of us has killed anyone, at least not recently. But our entire economy is based on coveting, right? I mean, that's what consumer economy is. We're told to covet what other people have that we don't, and so we go and buy it, or we strive for it, or we work hard for it so that we can have it too. Coveting is sort of an economic engine for us. That sort of kind of puts us in a bind. I don't really desire my neighbor's ox, but I've looked at a few houses, I got to tell you. And God didn't carve out an exemption for golf, so that puts in danger taking the Lord's name in vain, as well as perhaps lying and testifying falsely. I want to look at a few scorecards. I'm not judging, I'm just saying these things aren't as easy as you think when you really start thinking about how we live today. And don't get me started about keeping the Sabbath day holy. But beyond these basics, even more laws are given. Chapter 21 and 22 and 23, we have laws about Israel's worship. We have laws about how they're to live together and treat one another. And some of them, even today, sound like good common sense and fair and rational. And others seem harsh. And still others are absolutely difficult for us even to read. And I'm not talking about the one where you're not allowed to charge interest on loans for those of you who are in banking. That might get you in a little trouble these days. But there's laws about the treatment of slaves, including instructions for when, not if, when you sell your daughter into slavery. Sorry, Faye. What are you going to do? And the punishment for violating many of these laws, including not keeping the Sabbath day holy, is death. It's a wonder that any of the Israelites actually made it out of the wilderness alive when you read those laws and realize how many are supposed to be resulting in death. They're hard. Now, one of the Bible Year resources that I've been able to use is a weekly podcast that Hyde Park United Methodist Church recorded when they went through this Bible year originally. And for the week about the 10 Commandments, they interviewed Dr. Bo Adams from the Candler School of Theology at Emory University, and he had an interesting perspective on the 10 Commandments we get, but what about all these other 613? How do we make sense of them? Because we can't just dismiss them entirely, but we also can't follow them exactly they're written, or we'd be putting people to death constantly, just on the Sabbath. And he said, back in that culture, they needed certain guardrails to encourage them not to harm themselves or others and to honor God. And those guardrails were unique to that particular culture. And sometimes they can't be extracted from that culture. But there's an impulse behind all of the laws, a foundation behind all of them. And even if they don't apply exactly as they are written today, it's important to hold on to that impulse, to hold on to that foundation. And he points to Jesus and how Jesus dealt with the law. Many of his conflicts that he had with the Pharisees were around interpreting and applying the laws in their own day and age. Some of the commandments Jesus actually makes harder. Thou shalt not kill. But Jesus said, no, even if you want to commit murder in your heart, that counts as killing. Don't commit adultery, sure, but even if you commit adultery in your heart, you've violated the law. There's other commandments that he reframed, and he got challenged on what he and his disciples were doing on the Sabbath. And in Mark chapter 2, and he said, Sabbath was created for us. We weren't created for the Sabbath. And still others he completely dismissed. You've heard it said, an eye for an eye, but I say love your enemies and bless those who persecute you. But when asked what the greatest commandment is in Matthew 22, Jesus first quotes Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your strength. And then he quotes Leviticus 18:19, you must love your neighbor as yourself. You see, Jesus lifts up what's behind all of the law, all of the commandments. It's to love God and it's to love our neighbor. Those are our guardrails today as we follow Christ. That's why Jesus, and the basis upon which Jesus revised some of the laws and retaught them in different ways, it was right now. What does it mean for us to love God and love our neighbor in our world today? In every culture, in every age, the church has discerned together that very thing. And the Ten Commandments are a good place to start. One of the things I'm so amazed at the Ten Commandments 3,000 years ago, and they still challenge us today. We still can love God and love our neighbor by following those commands. But Jesus draws us even deeper into the heart of the law, into an overflowing love, even a love for our enemies. That it does us no good to treat the laws, whether we want to follow them or not, in a two-dimensional way of it's right there on the page, and so I follow it and I can check it off like it's some sort of other kind of law code. This law was the basis of a relationship with God. And that's what is the impulse behind it. That's what we hold on to. Well, back to the wilderness. The people embraced this covenant with God. And so God takes their relationship to the next level. God's holy and divine presence will dwell right in the midst of them. And God's presence is a really big deal because back in Genesis 3, after humanity's rebellion and sin in the garden, having access to God's presence was lost. But now through this covenant relationship, God has promised to be present with the Israelites in a new way. And so that's why we have 7 chapters of detailed architectural blueprints for the tabernacle. It's not the most engaging reading, the sacred tent of God's presence, but all of those details have a special symbolic value. Many of them echo the Garden of Eden. I heard one scholar said the tabernacle is a portable Garden of Eden because God is present back with us again through this, and that's what the imagery points to. But no sooner are the plans delivered that things go wrong again, horribly wrong. Moses is up on the mountain for so long that the people of Israel, they lose faith. They lose patience. They go to Aaron while Moses is away and ask him for another god to worship. And there emerges the golden calf. Those first 2 commandments are already broken. They have another god before him, and they made an idol for themselves. But the people have also broken God's heart once again. In chapter 32, God says to Moses, now leave me alone. Let my fury burn and devour them. Chapter 32 is a fascinating chapter because Moses actually talks God out of this fury. Moses doesn't leave God alone. He appeals to God's character. And in that chapter, you read Moses reasoning with God, look, if you destroy Israel, you would be going back on your covenant with Abraham. And not only that, but what would the other nations say if God freed his people from slavery in Egypt only to bring them out to the wilderness and devour them with fire? And so we're told that God changes his mind. And Moses goes back down to deal with the sin and the disobedience of his people. And in chapter 34, at the end of that story arc, God reveals his character to Moses in words that we're going to read over and over in the Psalms and the prophets. The Lord is compassionate and merciful, slow to anger, abounding in faithfulness to the covenant, or in steadfast love, in loyalty and faithfulness. God forgives his people, renews the promise of the covenant once more. We can learn a lot about our relationship with God and our life of faith through reading these stories, as ancient as they are. And as I say every single week, these stories are our story too. We affirm God's presence with us. We don't need to build a tabernacle or a temple, because God made a home among us in Jesus Christ and is still present with us now through the Holy Spirit. But God's promise to be with them always, to be with them in a special way, holds true for us. But we should also be paying attention to the experience of these Israelites in the wilderness, because they're very human. It's not hard to see ourselves in the ways they step in it over and over again. As I said, it's as much of a spiritual journey as a physical one, and our own spiritual journeys will take us through the wilderness from time to time, because there are no shortcuts between where we are and where God wants to bring us in our own spiritual life. And we go through wildernesses on our own. We go through it as churches. We go through it as a culture. Churches now all over the country are entering a time in the wilderness simply because increasing number of people have decided they don't need a faith community. And how can we be the church when folks are no longer just showing up at the door like they did in generations past? Our denomination is struggling in the wilderness right now, right along with plenty of other denominations, as we seek a way forward through conflict and division. And our congregation has been in the wilderness through this pandemic. And our congregation isn't immune to the conflicts and the divisions in our country or in our denomination. Our congregation isn't immune to the growing trends of religious disaffiliation. And we have an entire generation in this church that guided and led this church for 60 years who are slowly passing away. And who will step up to lead us next? We all go through times of wilderness. And you yourself may be in the wilderness now or have been there before. We give our lives to Christ. We seek to live a good life, but things still fall apart. We still go through divorces. We have trouble with our kids or with our aging parents. We have difficult relationships. We lose our job or we hit a dead end in our career. Life just brings troubles. And like the Israelites, sometimes it's because we're our own worst enemy. And we pray to God, why? Why me? How long will I struggle? How long will I be lonely? How long until I get some answers and know what direction to go with my life? We all spend time in the wilderness. And what do all of these wilderness experiences have in common? Well, first of all, they're all hard. They're all annoying. They're all frustrating. They're all exhausting. Nobody wants to go into the wilderness. It's not a fun place to be. But the other thing they have in common is that they're all necessary. Because there's ways that we grow spiritually and emotionally that can only happen through time in the wilderness. Only in the wilderness can we really learn what it means to truly trust in God, because honestly, we have no other option at that point. And only in the wilderness can we trust that God's going to provide what we need for today. And also trust that God will be there for us tomorrow, even though we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. Our impulse is to find security and to find assurance and for ourselves to make sure that we can manage. But the wilderness strips that away, and we have to trust God. And only in the wilderness can we learn the resilience necessary to deal with all that life can bring. Only there can we find healing. Only there can we learn to forgive and learn to be forgiven. I heard a wonderful word from a friend of mine in a sermon he preached a couple of years ago. He said, you may feel like you're wandering right now, but you're not lost. And you may feel like you're going nowhere, but God is showing you the next step. And when the time is right, you'll get to the next step after that, and to the next step after that. And you may feel like you're surrounded by a vast wasteland, but you are never truly alone. That's the story we learned from the Israelites in the wilderness. We know that the wilderness is the only way to get to the promised land. It's the only way to get to new life. It's the only way to get to resurrection. It's the only way. Let us pray. Holy God, we give you thanks for the stories of our spiritual ancestors, that we might see ourselves in them as they struggle to learn what it means to be your people, as they struggle to trust, as they struggle to believe, as they struggle to follow you faithfully. We thank you for the gift of your commandments and of your law and the way that leads to life. We give you thanks for the gift of your Son, Jesus Christ, who showed us in a new way that behind all of it is the impulse to love fully and completely, love you and love our neighbors in a way that reflects your love of us. Lord, I pray for any who are in the wilderness today, praying that you would give them an assurance of your love and of your presence, and that you would give them an assurance of a loving church family that is with them each step of the way. I pray that you would grant us your strength, your comfort, your constant provision, and remind us that you are always with us. We pray these things in the name of Jesus our Lord. Amen.
Amen.